Hoy te invito a caminar por mis solares, para demostrarte que sirven tus ideales. Somos humanos, aunque no pensemos iguales. No nos tratemos ni dañemos como animales.
Estamos vivos por la represión que hay con el pueblo. Tienen dinero para construir los hoteles, para construir de todo. Y a nosotros nos tienen pasando hambre y tremendo trabajo.
Welcome, I'm José Díaz-Balart. Something extraordinary is playing out just 90 miles off the coast of Florida. The people of Cuba are making their voices heard in ways they've never dared before. Their mantra, Patria y Vida, country and life. It's a play on the Castro regime's motto of Patria o muerte, fatherland or death. In the face of an often brutal dictatorial regime prone to imprisoning dissidents, so many are choosing to fight for life, and the stakes could not be higher.
The protests were spontaneous. Thousands chanting freedom as they marched, organized loosely over social media. The biggest anti-government demonstrations the island nation has seen in decades. And the crackdown was fierce. Security forces shooting at unarmed protesters, plainclothes officers beating men, women, and children. Arresting protesters, dragging them off. Hundreds swept up, still in prison, according to human rights groups. Now the question, was it a moment or the beginning of a movement?
We are together here. We are not going to stay quiet. We are not going to give up. Cuban people have our help and our support. And then we are requesting President Biden to take action and to support the Cuban people.
In the U.S. and around the world, Cuban exiles are still marching in solidarity, cheering protesters on. But on the streets of Havana, patrolled by heavily armed government troops and police, there have been no new large protests in days. The Cuban people are at a breaking point. COVID is surging. The economy is in tatters. Many waiting 6 or 7 or 8 hours just to purchase simple goods. The only thing there is a lot of is scarcity. As they often do, Cuba's leader blaming the U.S. embargo. Though after the protests broke out, he announced the regime would allow travelers coming into the country to bring in food and medicine until December, something they hadn't been able to do before. But with limited commercial flights every day and not everyone having a family member that can support them from the outside, it's unclear what impact this will make. Cuba has been ruled by a dictatorial socialist regime since Fidel Castro came to power in 1959. But as social media and the internet take hold and more young people find their voices, these protests may just be the start.
And we have a lot to discuss, including the news of new sanctions on Cuban officials over the crackdown over protests. And with me in studio, we have musician, actor, and advocate Jencarlos Canela. Thank you, Jencarlos, for being with us. Radio legend Enrique Santos, chairman of iHeartLatino and host of a nationally syndicated talk show with iHeartRadio. Thank you, Enrique. We're also very pleased to have Rosa María Payá. She's a human rights activist and founder of Cuba Decide. Thank you, Rosa María. And award-winning actor Laz Alonso, currently starring in the series The Boys. Good day to all of you. Thank you for being with us. And Rosa María, I want to start with you. Is what is happening in Cuba a moment or a movement?
It is definitely a movement, and we are approaching to the end, Jose. The Cuban people were massively protesting in the streets. At least 45 between cities and towns were protesting at the same time. Hundreds of thousands of Cubans, probably 1 million Cubans in the streets demanding the end of the dictatorship. And that came after at least 1,100 protests just from January to June. So definitely the Cuban people is fed up, is demanding change, and the sad part of this story is the harsh crackdown and the brutalization of the regime against the Cuban people.
Rosa María, you talk about brutalization. I have to underline that today, 9 years ago, your father, who was behind the Plan Varela, a human rights activist of the highest order, was killed in Cuba today. So this fight is not new.
Yes, it's not new, and it's important for the world to know that this July the regime has killed again several members of the opposition and citizens, regular citizens that were in the street has been hurt. Some of them are now dead as consequences of real bullets being shot by the military, and probably thousands of Cubans are right now detained or disappear. Our numbers registered at least 627, but our numbers are very partial. But Jose, I have to tell you, and that is something that we have been thinking and feeling during this whole week. Raúl Castro and Fidel Castro killed my father and killed Harold Cepero. He was my age when he was killed 9 years ago today. But they couldn't kill their legacy and their voices, and now we are seeing that voices multiplied in the Cuban people in and out the island demanding freedom.
Laz Alonso, what are those voices saying? Who are they?
Well, thank you for having me, first of all. It was very important for me to translate what's being said into English. Unfortunately, because we as Cubans and descendants of Cubans know the situation in Cuba. But the Castro regime has done an amazing job at selling this propaganda of equality, of this mythical nation where everyone is treated equally and has all of these rights and universal health care and education for everyone. And I felt that it was my job to translate the truth of why people are in the streets protesting, and the truth of who it is that's protesting, and shedding light and removing the curtain so that people can see what's really going on the island. And these are faces that look very much like the faces that we see here. And I felt that it was very important for people to see Black and brown and Afro-Latinos out in the street also demanding civil and human rights, basic human rights.
Enrique Santos, it's so important to mention that, what Laz was talking about. It is an entire segment of the Cuban people that, knowing full well that the act of speaking, just even saying Patria y Vida, saying the words of a song, could get them in jail or worse, and yet they're out there. Why are they doing it, and what are they saying?
Well, that's the question I think the international community and all of us as good human beings and citizens of the globe need to realize, that there's a real-time genocide that is happening just 90 miles from the coast of our great country here in the United States, that every night we are able to speak here on this show, on my radio program. We're able to discuss things amongst ourselves freely without being oppressed or being threatened. And to think that, just 90 miles from where we're sitting right now, there are Cubans that are being imprisoned, being beat up, being tortured just because they say the words Patria y Vida. And it's so important people like Laz to come forward. Think of the millions of Afro-Cubans that are suffering. The LGBT community. You can just go on and on and on and on. And I just do not understand how the international community stays quiet. They stay mute. Watching real time on our cell phones. It's not made up, Jose. We all see it, and we're seeing this genocide taking place real time on videos and through pictures and through the internet, of course, has been cut off, but through photos and talking with loved ones that have recargas, that have their phones charged, and they can actually talk with their loved ones. There's hundreds of people missing. People have been arrested. Kids are being dragged from their mother's arms and being forced into military service, taken to other provincias in Cuba, armed with a bat to repress other Cubans. It's disgusting, and I just do not understand how the international community does not come to condemn this directly and to speak louder for the people that are being oppressed.
Jencarlos, you were born and raised in Hialeah. You're a South Florida guy, traveled the world. This is very real to you. Why?
Listen, I want to highlight something. First, it's real to me because I'm a Cuban American, and I was born and raised in this country. And all of us that we don't realize we were born privileged. And in the face of what's happening right now, we realize it more than ever. And it is our duty and it is our right to exercise that freedom of speech for those that can't. our parents that immigrated to this country. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to be the son or the daughter of Cuban immigrants. You just have to be the son and the daughter of immigrants. First generation Hispanic Americans need to understand this is our battle, because if it's your dad's battle, if it's your mom's battle, if it was your grandparents' battle, it is our battle too. It's our duty to honor their sacrifices in a moment like this and speak up about these injustices. I hear a lot of noise. Our country's great at making a lot of noise, and we come from a very divisive moment. This country's divided. You know, we need to understand there may be some that are against war. There may be some that are in favor of it. But when we call to honor our troops and our men and women in uniform, there is a bipartisan response. We need to remember that as a human race, we need bipartisanship. This is a moment to come together, to unify as a country and to take a stance in favor of freedom and democracy. This is a moment where the black community needs to understand that this totalitarian government has persecuted, has killed and murdered Afro-Cubans, has persecuted gay people, has persecuted people of religious beliefs that don't align with their revolutionary ideology and their totalitarian ideology. This is everyone's fight.
Laz, what is it that you think? Is there a disconnect in what people understand, think about, talk about Cuba in a general way, and what actually is going on inside that island?
There is definitely a disconnect. And I feel like right now, the way to bridge that gap is to take politics out of the picture and try to appeal to people's humanity, to explain to them that these people barely get enough rice, maybe 6 eggs for the entire month, that they don't have the freedom to protest. They don't have freedom of speech. They don't have a free press. A lot of the liberties that we take for granted here don't even exist there. That the beautiful cars that you see is not because they love cars. It's because it's all they've had for the last 62 years, that they keep running with coat hangers, you know, and transistors. Like, they figured it out, but that it is human rights issues that are at stake here, basic human rights. I feel like the connection is starting to happen. People are starting to listen. People are starting to get it, because there has been a romanticism. There has been a romanticism of the Castro regime. And listen, on paper, it sounds beautiful, but people need to see in actuality how ugly oppression, systemic oppression on that island is. And taking away the embargo is saying fund more systemic oppression. And I feel like when you explain it in that language, people start to get it. They start connecting what they're seeing, the images coming out of the island, with a lot of the words and the mission that they've been on here at the United States, fighting for human rights and equal rights here. They realize, oh, I get it.
Thank you, Laz. Rosa Maria, as we go forward, you know, there's been a strong response by the Cuban regime to tamp down whatever may be going on in the streets. Is there a future for the Cuban people? Is there a future for those who want change in the island?
Of course, there is a future, and that future also needs the support of the international community. The Cuban people is demanding human rights. They are demanding freedom, are demanding the end of the dictatorships at the highest possible cost, which is the life. They are making their part. Now, the part of the portion of the Cuban nation that lives outside the island, we have the responsibility to make the world act.
Rosa María Payá, Enrique Santos, Jencarlos Canela, Laz Alonso, thank you for being with us, and thank you for enriching this very important conversation.
Thank you, Jose, for shedding light on this much-needed topic and human rights violation that's been taking place for way too long. Cuban people want libertad. They are desperately screaming for it at the top of their lungs.
When we come back, I speak with Yotuel, the musician whose song Patria y Vida has become an anthem for Cubans in the island. Why his collaborators on the song in Cuba are now in prison. Plus, the young activist leading the movement for change And as we go to break, a message from some of them from inside Cuba. These young people risking so much to get their message out.
These protests are the first time in my 30 years that I have the opportunity to witness a demonstration of this scale. I mean, thousands of different people with different social background in dozens of Cuban cities demanding freedom and also demonstrating to the world the ineffectiveness of the communist regime to respond effectively to the claims of the people and, of course, to their needs.
There was no race, no skin color, no sexuality, just brothers and sisters helping each other, fighting for the same thing, freedom. International attention helped us by taking our fight to another level. We're very happy to know that we have people all around the world supporting us and watching what's happening.
In Cuba and here in the U.S., there's a bold new generation leading the charge for freedom, and they're using their talents and social media savvy to spread their message to the world, many doing it at great personal risk to themselves and their families. Morgan Radford has their stories.
It was a movement that started organically, out of pain and frustration. Calls for democracy and freedom in Cuba, unlike anything seen since the country's 62-year-old communist regime came to power. Calls spreading far and wide, led by a younger generation armed with something new: social media.
Do you think this movement could have happened without social media?
Not at all. No.
Alejandro Gonzalez and Michael Rodriguez have become famous as Los Pichy Boys, two cousins turned social media sensation, with more than 500,000 followers who have been uploading videos to their Instagram account from users in Cuba so that the world can see what is happening, even when the Cuban government shut down the internet to keep images of protesters from getting out.
And the only thing that they have to defend themselves is the social medias. And they even cut internet so they can show out what is happening inside there.
This movement started on social media, and the young people from Cuba are tired of living under a communist regime where they don't have any future.
I mean, you all have really been doing the job of many reporters, getting information de la isla, from the island, to everyone here in this international community. Are you surprised by the level of feedback and engagement your social media posts have received?
Since the media and the press in Cuba is controlled by the state, they go out on the street in the morning, they do all the protests, they try to film most thing they can, and at 9, 2, 3, 4 in the morning, that's when they send us the videos, because that's when they have better signal. We go online every single day until 4, 5 in the morning talking to them, and yes, it's a big responsibility, but it's our duty. They made us famous. We need to make them free.
I went back to study and live in Cuba back when I was younger. And when you would talk to people, no one was public in their criticism. And so now to see people in the streets is something I could never have imagined after living there. Could you?
Yeah, never. No, never. I never, and you're saying that now, and I'm getting goosebumps. I always thought that Cuba was going to be free, but I never thought I was going to see it with my own eyes. And when we saw that on Sunday, we were in tears watching what was going on, because you can see an entire island rising up, chanting for freedom.
Those memories make you emotional.
Of course.
Why?
I'm a father. I have two kids, and I will give my life for them. And I don't know what's going to happen for me if I will see my kids like that.
That's why they're meeting with lawmakers to put pressure on the Biden administration, calling for change and a roadmap to help Cubans on the island achieve freedom. And they're not alone. Felice Gorordo co-founded Roots of Hope in Miami, and he says this generation and this movement calls for a new approach. His organization is raising funds and awareness to amplify the voices of young Cubans.
The young people who are the true agents of change are more empowered and more emboldened than ever before. And I truly believe this is the beginning of the end of this Cuban regime.
Why is the younger generation so important to this movement?
The ones leading this charge and that to a great extent have sparked this movement are our Afro-Cuban brothers and sisters. And they are artists that are using their art to inspire a new generation. They are not your typical politicians or activists. And I think it's our responsibility to help amplify those voices and make sure that they're not drowned out in this process.
And they say they're not stopping until everyone is free.
Morgan Radford reporting. One of the biggest artists driving that change is the Cuban-born Yotuel Romero. He and his collaborators recorded his song, Patria y Vida. That means homeland and life. As I mentioned earlier, it's a twist on the words patria o muerte, fatherland or death, a phrase often repeated by Fidel Castro and his regime. I spoke to Yotuel about why his music and his message are resonating so much. What is the reality of Cuba today?
Mira, es increíble que todos los videos que estamos viendo en Cuba, lo que el pueblo sale a pedir es libertad, fin de la dictadura, patria y vida. Esas son las voces que se oyen, que se escuchan. Y si la revolución, según ellos llaman, siempre ha escuchado al pueblo, entonces hay algo que no están escuchando. No están escuchando a su pueblo, que sobre todo son gente jóvenes. Es la juventud cubana, chamacos de 20, de 25, de 21, quien ha salido a decir, se acabó.
It's interesting, Yotuel, that the Afro-Cuban community, which has been the most persecuted, the most abused community in Cuba, is the one that's in the front lines asking for change, for freedom.
¿Quiénes están presos? El 95% de las personas que están presas son gente negra, son gente de la raza negra. Por supuesto que es la raza más dolida y más dañada por la dictadura. Entonces, son ellos, los familiares, los primos, son ellos los que primeramente han sentido el grito de libertad.
Yotuel, the director of your video in Cuba, jailed. One of the two singers in your video in Cuba, jailed. The leader of the San Isidro movement, jailed. What is it about your song and your movement that has so many in that regime quaking in their boots?
Porque lo que yo siento es que por primera vez hay una conexión de los cubanos que estamos en Canadá, en España, en Italia, en Suiza, en Holanda, en Estados Unidos. Por primera vez los cubanos se unen a un grito que es patria y vida. O sea, siempre ellos tuvieron una ventaja porque los cubanos estábamos fraccionados, estábamos divididos, pero ahora estamos unidos más fuerte que nunca.
Yotuel, what makes you cry? What are your hopes and your dreams?
Bueno, hermano, llorar me hace ver sobre todo, mira, se lo comentaba a un periodista, yo viví en Cuba, a mí también me prepararon para ese enemigo, pero el enemigo que me pintaban a mí era un enemigo armado, fuerte, corpulento, y lo que estoy viendo yo es a nuestra propia gente, a nuestro pueblo desarmado, descalzo, en chancleta, con un short, sin camisa. La gran mayoría jóvenes. A mí eso me dio mucho dolor. Me dio mucho dolor que no supieran distinguir que el enemigo, sin darnos cuenta, siempre lo tuvimos en la isla, y era la dictadura. Ahora cuando los cubanos vemos cómo reaccionas con el propio cubano, solamente por pensar diferente, solamente por decir libertad, solamente por decir no quiero más esta dictadura, no quiero más este comunismo, quiero patria y vida. La reacción tan desproporcionada que han hecho los propios cubanos, a mí eso me reventó, hermano, me reventó. ¿Y qué me gustaría? Me gustaría una Cuba libre, sinceramente, ahora más que nunca. Porque ahora sabemos todos los cubanos la verdad. se han quitado la careta, se han quitado la máscara y ahora nos hemos dado cuenta realmente quién es el enemigo del propio cubano.
Yotuel, un abrazo fraternal con mi admiración.
Muchísimas gracias a todos tus televidentes y nada, sigamos corriendo la voz. Hay mucha gente desaparecida en Cuba, se están cometiendo muchos crímenes, hay mucha crueldad y necesitamos mucha ayuda del mundo entero. Patria y Vida.
Yotuel, thank you very much, flashing that L of liberty, libertad. Some of the most vocal activists have been young people with ties to Cuba, carrying on the fight for freedom, started by their parents or their grandparents. One of them is model, singer, and influencer, America Valdez. America, thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me on.
America, what does it mean to you? Why have you decided to raise your voice in such a strong manner?
Well, I have an incredible example of fighting for the Cuban people at home with my father. And the Cuban community is basically all that I know. It's all that I've grown up with. And I really have such a love for where I come from. And I understand that there are certain ways in which I can facilitate like moving that information to a broader audience. So that's kind of why I took it upon myself. I just thought that I was pretty prepared to do so, and I didn't see anybody else doing it. So that's why I did it.
America, there are so many misconceptions about Cuba, about Cubans, about the reality there. What is it that you are so intent on clarifying?
You know, I think that the first step really is listening to Cubans. So clarifying that if you are researching Cuba and you are not speaking to Cubans while you're doing that research, then you are not researching Cuba. That it's very, very hard to get reliable information, like from, let's say, an organization or from a study or a research done in Cuba on what life is like in Cuba. So really the only way that you can properly educate yourself on the subject is listening to Cubans. So I want to clarify what the actual experience of living in Cuba is like for these people. I want to clarify that, you know, these people are tired of the government. I think there's a lot of people conveniently leaving that out, but that's really what's important to the people of Cuba.
America Valdez, so happy to be with you. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for helping amplify our message.
When we come back, actor, director, musician Andy Garcia on why this bold new uprising in Cuba represents hope for change, and what the legendary Celia Cruz told me a quarter century ago about her dreams for a free Cuba. Celia Cruz, Celia, if you could come with me very quickly. Quick exclusive with you.
In English?
Let's try in English, Celia.
Remember that my English is not very good.
You are great. You were singing to 34 presidents democratically elected, and in your song you said what?
I said, dear President, don't help Castro anymore because we want Castro leave Cuba and we want Cuba libre del comunismo.
Celia Cruz, that is the thing that everybody who came here is talking about tonight. Congratulations on a beautiful song and a beautiful evening. Celia Cruz, just one of the many performers who made history here tonight. That was my interview with the legendary Celia Cruz after she sang to 34 presidents at the Summit of the Americas in Miami in 1994. Joining me now is award-winning actor and director Andy Garcia, an outspoken critic of Cuba's communist regime. Andy, it's so good to see you. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Jose. It's good to see you. Long time no see, as they say.
That's right. What a different time we're living in. And I think this month made such a difference in Cuba, something that we hadn't seen in 62 years of a regime that has not had elections and has not permitted any kind of human rights. And yet people have taken to the streets. How do you see that, Andy?
Well, people are very desperate down there. I mean, they've been desperate from the get-go, obviously, but the regime has always managed to, squash any kind of protests. I think the largest one was in '94 called the Maleconazo, but the regime went out and, crushed them. But I think from the beginning, of the world of the internet. I always felt that that was going to be what's going to finally expose the Castro regime to the world. You know, they had control of all newspaper and oral sort of outlets through their propaganda for so many years. And the internet has broken that barrier and they can't control it. That's why they've canceled it recently during these protests, because they don't want all the information out. But it's still leaking out. And, you know, hopefully that we can provide as here in America, certainly, is the access to internet and somehow give the people the voice that they so deserve at this very crucial time in that history.
Andy, is there or has there been a disconnect as far as what people perceive Cuba is like and what's going on in Cuba and the reality in that country since 1959?
Sure. I mean, the propaganda machinery of Cuba is very, very well trained, and that's been going on forever. You look at the reality that you find around the world, saying, for example, the healthcare system Cuba is one of the best in the world, and you know, if you see the images of the hospitals in Cuba and the lack of medicines, the lack of aspirin, is the hypocrisy of that is amazing. But yet, they are able to get the information out. You know, Cuba is a paradise. You know, all the people in Cuba are educated, like if they weren't educated before the revolution. It's a whole hypocrisy of what's been going on there for so many years through that regime. And the people have had it. As you know, the people in the streets in Cuba now are not saying, send us money or send us food or send us vaccines, although they need all that, of course. And we should provide that for them. But that's not what they're saying on the street. They're saying, give me my liberty. Give me liberty, give me life. Enough with this repressive, oppressive regime. It's a tyranny what's been going on there for now 62 years. And the people have said, that's it, enough.
Do you think it's a moment or is it a movement?
I think it's both. I think it's a movement that's created the moment. And I think it's my feeling that it's not gonna go away. And I sense that, you know, at any given time, who knows how these things go on through history, you know, at some point there has to be, someone's got to jump ship, you know, someone in the military, you know, part of the military has to say, what are we doing to these people on the street? Why are we killing them? Why are we arresting them? Why are we, repressing them, and have a switch over and get behind the people on the street. And also the international community, of course, you know, the OAS, the United Nations. The world has to finally come to their senses, if they haven't already, about the situation in Cuba and the harm that regime is doing to the people. I mean, it's going on in Venezuela, Nicaragua, all over the world, in Syria, you know, so this is a problem. But we're talking today specifically about Cuba because obviously it's something that we both have a very close connection to.
Andy, I just thinking about how you have worked throughout your career with Cachao, who created the Mambo, with Celia Cruz, with Gloria Estefan, with Emilio Estefan. So many people who have, through their art, expressed their dreams and hopes for Cuba. Do you have hope, or do you just feel as though so much time has passed? So many people have died along the way, they just won't be able to see something like they desire so much, freedom.
Yes, and people are dying in Cuba and never be able to even have witnessed freedom in Cuba, have grown into a system where it's never been even, we lost it. I mean, we gained it coming to America. The Cuban people who had to leave Cuba lost Cuba, but we were able to gain our liberty and our voice, which is why we're here, why we're blessed to be in this country. But yes, a lot of people will never see it. We'll never see that day. And that day will come. You know, as Martin Luther King said, you know, my eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. And that's, you know, there's no regime that ever can ever sustain the will of the people, you know, and it's going to be more difficult in Cuba because the regime's going to try to hold on to power, and they're doing it now, you know, with their repression. But at the end of the day, history tells us that the will of the people and the people who are on the right side of the truth, of the absolute truth, will eventually get absolute freedom.
Andy Garcia, it's good to talk to you, my friend. Thank you.
Oh, my love. Thanks.
I want to thank everyone for joining us today for what is the start of a conversation at what is perhaps the start of a larger movement. Cuba is at a crossroads. People are risking it all, clamoring for freedom, for Patria y Vida. Thank you for the privilege of your time.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.